All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. This is super exciting. Welcome to Hoya Dev's Software Development Bootcamp. Let me tell you, I am thrilled to be teaching this one last time this semester. I'm a senior spring, so this will be my last semester teaching this, but I couldn't be more excited. So first off, welcome to Hoya Devs. This is going to be a very exciting next 10 weeks. I promise you're going to learn a lot. I hope that you enjoy it and keep coming. And it's something that you find as interesting and enjoyable to work on as I do, right? So we're really going to be learning from the very beginner level how to build websites, what goes into building a website. And throughout the course, we're going to work our way up, starting with the basics. And then we're going to build more and more advanced websites and continuously build on concepts throughout the semester, right? And so we'll talk about that in a minute. What we're going to do tonight is I'm going to give you a little bit of overview of what to expect throughout the course. And then we're actually going to live code our very first website together tonight, right? So the goal is after this hour, everyone in here will have built their first website. And I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. First, I wanted to introduce a couple of people here tonight. My name is Reed. Like I said, I will be teaching the course, teaching bootcamp this semester. So I will be kind of like the primary person if you have questions about stuff we're learning, want to reach out to me about recordings, etc. I'll be the person to reach out to. However, Matt, do you want to stand up and introduce?
Sure. Sorry guys, I'm munched on this PB&J. I'm taking over Reed's job as running Hoya developers this semester, so that's overseeing all of our projects and making sure everything goes smoothly. Yeah, Leo?
Is this Larry inside out?
No.
Okay.
What's up, y'all? I recognize like half y'all in here. I'm Leo. I use they them pronouns. Sophomore, studying STIA. Yeah, I'm a sophomore. I'm the VP for Hoya developers. Yeah, I'll be here kind of acting as a TA. I should be here in pretty much every class. But I just want to say like welcome. For those of y'all who have been through like previous iterations of this boot camp, I know a few of y'all have been through like Hoyalytics training. We just want to emphasize this is a very project-centered kind of environment. So every week we want to be chipping away at something that like concrete you can take out of this. We're here to develop you, not just like be a farm feeder for the club, pretty much.
Yes. So as Leo and Matt just mentioned, it won't always, like I'm not probably ever going to be the only one of us here. The goal is that I will be teaching, showing new concepts. We're going to be doing a lot of live coding. And then Leo and or Matt will always be here as well, to where when questions come up, as they always do, right, something's not working, you have a bug in your code, it'll be super easy just to raise your hand and then they'll come to you, help you troubleshoot that. So we don't want to leave anyone behind. We want to make sure that everyone's easily following along and nothing is really, we want to be here as a resource for you. And so the motivation behind Bootcamp is to kind of fill a void that we saw in the computer science curriculum, right? Where in CS classes and in other training programs on campus, there's a lot of theoretical computer science taught in classrooms, right? There's a lot of data science taught. There's a lot of like tech adjacent concepts covered. But what this is truly like the only structured learning program for how to build websites, right? And how to develop software. So that's the main focus of this course. And why I'm so excited to be teaching it is that this is like what I am most interested in. This is my favorite stuff to talk about and to do. As I mentioned before, please do not think that just because you've never built a website before, don't really have never done this before, that is completely okay, and that is like what we want, right? We want to take you along the journey every step of the way, so we don't anticipate that you have any prior experience doing any of this, right? We're going to start from the very basics and build up to more and more advanced concepts. There are three goals we have for this course, right? The first is learning how to build websites, notably using what is used in industry, right? So when you see these internships, when you see job applications talking about certain technologies, for example, like React or JavaScript, right? These might not mean anything to you right now, but we want to teach the most relevant technologies that if you're trying to build a personal project or go get an internship, that it's relevant experience, that we're making sure that you're learning something that is most useful and what is kind of used as industry standard tools and technologies today. The second goal is to build a community, right? So in past semesters of Bootcamp, I know a lot of the people kind of throughout the course have gotten pretty close, become friends. And so our goal is to really provide this extracurricular community for those that are interested in software development and computer science on campus, right? That's something that we're hoping to foster more of throughout the semester. And lastly, looking toward, as Matt and Leo alluded to, kind of our project teams in subsequent semesters, we want to make sure that this semester you learn the skills and the languages necessary to succeed on some of our client projects. So our Bootcamp program is kind of where we teach you everything that you'll need to know to actually work on a project team, which comes in future semesters. And so the nice thing about devs is that anybody that completes the Bootcamp throughout the semester, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, will be placed onto a project team next semester where you're building websites for real world clients, whether that's startups. We've worked with other Georgetown clubs in the past. And so that's how we continue that learning experience by working on a group project, right, with people also interested in learning how to code. Classes are going to be every Monday and Tuesday at this time. It should, Matt, as long as we get room booking confirmation, always be in this room. I know it's a little toasty in here tonight. I don't know if anyone else is feeling kind of hot in here. We'll try and figure out if we can maybe get AC on or figure out. I think it's just because today was so hot that, like, I don't know if anyone was on loud today. I was on loud too for a little bit. It was like a furnace, so I imagine that it won't be this bad here on out. The other thing that we're going to do this semester is we're actually going to record all of the classes, right? And so if you're sick, if you have a class conflict, we'll be able to send out that recording so you don't fall behind. And it also will be good if you ever want to go back and reference something we talk about, it'll be there for you to look at. I do strongly encourage, if you are not sick and if you don't have a class conflict, to come in person, right? There's countless YouTube videos, there's countless courses online that if you wanted to learn how to do web development online, you could. I think the unique advantage of being in person is that we'll have people here to help, and we'll also be able to live troubleshoot and kind of pace the course based on how we are doing kind of as a class in learning, if that makes sense. I think there is a lot of value in being here in person. Everyone that had signed up on the Bootcamp list from last night or before should have gotten an email from me about joining the Hoya Dev Slack. Did anybody not get an email or an invitation to the Hoya Dev Slack? Did everybody get an email? Can I get a show of hands if you got the email to the Slack? Okay, wonderful. If you haven't, please don't be shy. This will also give you an invite to the Slack. But this is where I'll be sending communications about if class has to get moved for some whatever reason. This is where I'll send a lot of links to stuff we talk about. And then, like I said, we'll also have at least one additional instructor, either Leo, Matt, we'll maybe even pull in a couple other PMs at some point, to where if you have an issue, if something's not working in your laptop for whatever reason, we don't want to leave anybody behind, right? We want to make sure that everybody has a chance to catch up and everybody feels like they're able to follow along. And that's why we're going to make sure we do this. Okay, so for what we're actually going to talk about now, right? If this means nothing to you, then you're in the right place. Some of you may have seen a couple of these technologies or languages before, but there's really two main parts to the class, right? The first 4 weeks is where we're going to just talk about the very basics of web development. So that's HTML, something called CSS. We're going to be talking about Git and GitHub, which are not only related to this class, but any future CS curriculum will probably involve Git. As well as we'll do a little bit of UI design. So how do we actually design nice looking websites? How do we actually think about where elements on the screen should go and that sort of thing? We're gonna have a midpoint project, which is where you'll actually build your own portfolio website. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then the second half, or the second, I would say 2/3 of the class, is where we'll transition into talking about JavaScript, React. We'll talk about using APIs to get data. We'll talk about using third-party libraries to write more code. And then the final project will be an interactive front-end website, right? So we're going to take kind of everything we talk about over the 10 weeks, and you'll have a tangible project that is your own by the end of the class to be able to either put on your portfolio project, reference back. And so like I said, as Leo mentioned, we really want this to be a class where you can take away tangible work at the end of it as well. So as I said, you'll build 2 of your own websites. The first will be a personal website. The second will be like an interactive front-end website where there's like animation, there's data, you could build a game. We'll talk about that kind of as we get later on in the course. But now, does anybody have any questions related to what we're gonna be learning? Anything logistically about Slack, anything at all? Okay, with that being said, today we are going to build our very first website, okay? And the reason we're doing this is that I'm a big believer in learning by doing, and my goal for today is to give you all a taste of what's to come over the next 4 weeks, right? So in the past, if anyone went to the first couple bootcamp sessions in past semesters, we spent the whole first day kind of on tooling and setup. We're not doing that this semester. We're gonna get our feet wet and jump right in today. And so the thing that I wanna emphasize is that coding is a way to solve problems, right? When you're building something, you're ideally building something that is either making your life easier, making other people's lives easier, is interesting, right? You want people to use something that you're going to build. And something that we've heard throughout campus is that ordering food at Epi now sucks, right? Like, I don't know. Leo was telling me it's gotten a little better, but like, I basically like don't go to Epi anymore because Grubhub takes forever. And I also don't like how apparently there's now a way to do this, but it used to be that you had to do 2 meal exchanges for like 1 coffee and 1 pastry. And that was like criminal. Like, no, I needed my coffee and pastry in the morning. So what we're going to build today is we are going to say we can do this better, right? We can make a nice interface for Epi that is a very simple looking site that we just get to pick one of 3 drinks and we get to pick one of 3 pastries, right? And then we'll also kind of simulate over here that what we want to put like in our cart, and we'll also make a nice little like place order button, right? Just for this demo today, it's not going to like talk to Grubhub or anything. It's not going to talk to Epi, but we're going to design how this website should look and feel, right? So if we wanted people to be able to use a site like this instead, they would be able to. Is everyone with me what we're going to be doing today and learning how to do? Okay. As I said, I think learning by doing, especially when coding, is one of the best ways to learn how to code. And so we're going to do it. A few things I will note as we do this over the next, 45 minutes in this first training, okay? The first is that I'm going to be going faster than I will normally teach, right? So the goal is not to understand every line of code we write tonight. The goal is to see what is possible, right? And to get a feel for what we're going to be doing. And so I don't expect anyone in here to like fully understand every single line of code we write. I want you to start to pick up on patterns and understand a little bit of why we're going to write specific code the way we do. And then over the next 2 or 3 weeks, every line of code that we write tonight will be explained, right? And you'll understand exactly what the syntax is, why we're typing what we are. But tonight, I really just want to give you more of a taste of what we're going to be doing. So bear with me. I would like everyone, if you want to build a website, to follow along. I'm going to teach you kind of every step of the way how we're going to do this. And hopefully by 7:30, we'll all have built our very first website together. So we're all going to want to go to this URL. It's called codesandbox.io. And so I'm actually going to go to codesandbox.io, and you should see something that looks like this. And so what this is going to do is instead of having to download any programs to actually run and write our code tonight, we're all going to do it in our browser. Tomorrow we'll look at how to kind of set up a better environment and get prepared for the rest of the class. But tonight, I want you to click sign in and click sign in with Google. This will make it easy. So you're going to create your own Code Sandbox account. This should be pretty simple. I'm going to go ahead and do my Georgetown email. And so once you do this, you may have to log in with Duo. It's just a normal sign in with Google thing. It may ask you for a couple of like prompts right when you hit create account. It may say like, what is your role? And I would put student. And it may say like, what are you using this for? And like education. But it should be a pretty intuitive setup process. So I'm going to give everybody a minute or two here. Oh yes, Matt, thanks for sending that in.
Yeah.
So this is also the shared, Matt sent in Slack a link to where this is where we're gonna make sure all of the calendar, like the GCals for the rooms and times are up to date. Like I said, normally it'll be every Monday, Tuesday at 6:30, but if something changes, we'll send a Slack message out and we'll make sure that that GCal stays updated. Can I get a show of hands? Was everyone able to create a Code Sandbox account? No issues? Wonderful.
Anyone feeling at all confused yet?
If any time tonight you, yeah?
I just have my hand up still.
Oh, okay, we're good?
Yeah.
Wonderful. If anything comes up tonight with something not working, please raise your hand. Matt and Leah will be on the lookout for that. Okay, so everybody should see a screen that looks something like this. You should have no projects. And what we're going to do is we are going to click this upper right button, Create. And it'll pop up a bunch of these tiles right here. It'll say popular templates. And what this does is it lets us have to write less code to get started. We're going to go ahead and click on this HTML plus CSS icon. So this third one, if we go back here, this HTML plus CSS box. Does everybody see this, HTML plus CSS? Go ahead and click on it. And let's just name it My First Website. For visibility, go ahead and just click Unlisted. So My First Website, visibility, unlisted. And then keep the runtime as a sandbox. This isn't super important. Either will work, but for ease of use, just keep it a sandbox for now. And then we can go ahead and click Create Sandbox. Okay. When you click Create Sandbox, it should take you to an editor that looks something like this. Does everyone see this? Are we confused? Any questions, any issues? Okay. So this is where we're going to be writing our code tonight. There's 3 columns that may be visible at first. On this left-hand side is where we'll see our files. And so by default, this created 3 different files for us. A file called index.html, a file called package.json, and a file called styles.css. This middle column is where we're actually going to write our code. This will probably look a little overwhelming at first. I completely understand. But in a couple of weeks, this will seem like second nature to you. And then on the right is where we have our preview, right? So this is what Code Sandbox is showing us what the code we've written actually looks like so far. And so what I prefer to do is instead of keeping this preview in here, I'm going to click this icon to open in its own window, right? So it's a different tab in my browser. And so now it'll just kind of open just right here. But if I go back here, I'm going to close this tab. I can just then close that preview window so I kind of just see the code. Does that make sense? Just trying to clean up the environment a little bit here to make it easier. Can everybody see this, by the way? I'm happy to make the text bigger if we need. I know my vision is terrible, so please speak up if there's anything I can do to make it easier. Okay, we good? Let's keep chugging. So we'll notice here the default text it gave us, there's a lot of stuff, right? We'll see these are called HTML tags. We'll talk a lot more about what tags are, what they represent. But the thing that I want us to notice is that in this default preview, all we see is this text right here. We see this is a simple HTML plus CSS template, right? And it's big text on the screen. And here we see that the same text can be found inside of this H1 tag, right? So we have this H1 tag. All tags start with a less than sign, the name of the tag, a greater than sign, and then the corresponding closing tag that looks like this, right? So everyone can see how on this template line, you have the opening tag, some content in between it, and then the closing tag is the same as the opening tag, except it has a / before the tag name. So H1 stands for a header, and so H1 you can think of as being like large text. I want to put large text on the screen. Every line of code we write in this index.html file, you can think of as like the bare bones of our site, right? So the styles.css file on the left, this is where we're going to write lines of code to make the website look pretty. what we write in index.html is to actually like put that on the screen. And so if I actually toggle over here, I can see that this is like what we want to build here, right? This is what we want to try and see how far we can get in building tonight. Let's go ahead and change that H1 text. Instead of saying this is our first website, let's make it say Epi Meal Exchange menu. So I'm going to come back over to the browser, and instead of putting this is a simple HTML and CSS template, I'm going to type Epi Meal Exchange menu. And then hit Command S to save. Now if we come over and I refresh the page, it should update live with Code Sandbox to now show Epi Meal Exchange menu. Do we see that? Okay, great. So let's take a look at this mockup again. This is called a mockup. And a lot of times what we'll see throughout the course is it's much easier to code something if we know what we want it to look like. And so the next thing we see here is we want to be able to show the different menu items, and then in a little bit we'll get to how to do this right-hand side. But for now, let's just focus on getting the content over here done. And so the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to write this step 1 and pick your drink, okay? So I'm going to go back over to my browser, and underneath this H1, I'm going to do open or less than sign, so I'm going to create a new tag, and I'm going to do an H6 tag, right? So H1 is like a big text. You can think of H6 as a little bit of a smaller text. So the bigger the number, the smaller the text size. So I'm going to type less than sign H6 greater than sign. This is an open tag. And then I'm going to type step 1. And then I'm going to close this by doing the same symbols /H6. And then underneath that, I'm going to do an H3, pick your drink, and close that tag. Less than sign / the name of the tag greater than sign. You'll see here that it highlights it nicely, so it's a little bit easier to read with the color highlighting. If I click save and go back over to my preview, now we'll see step 1, pick your drink, appears on our preview here. This is how we're adding text to our site. Okay, let's go back to our mockup. So now we need to actually include the items, right? And we'll talk a lot more about how we organize HTML in coming up classes. But whenever you look at a website, you can think about things that are in containers, right? So like a lot of the times you can know something is like in a container just like visually. Like does everyone see how like this, everything in here looks like it's kind of like in a container? Like it's grouped together on the site in a logical manner. And not only is this grouped on the site in kind of a logical manner, we can think of all 3 of these items also grouped together in sort of like a logical idea, right? So like we have a group of items. And so the equivalent, what we're going to need to do in HTML is we're going to use a tag called div. So I'm going to do open then sign or less than sign div. When we go to style this and we want to make this look pretty, we need a way to tell our browser which tag we're talking about, right? And so there's a nice thing in HTML called a class. So before I close the open tag, I'm going to click class. I'm going to write class equals, and then I'm going to do 2 quotation marks. So div class equals. So we're just think about this as we're naming this group. We're naming this container, and I'm going to call it row. This you can name it whatever you want. I like to make it simple and intuitive. So we're going to name it row. I'm going to finish this opening tag by typing the greater than symbol. And then I'm going to actually close it. I'm going to write the closing tag. Now in the closing tag, you don't include the class again. You only need that in the open part of the tag, right? But I'm going to for now, I'm going to not put anything in here, but I'm just going to write that closing tag. And then I'm going to open this div up. You can hit enter a few times. So all of the next tags we write are going to go inside of this div. They're sandwiched in between the open and closing tag. So just like with this text, it's just text inside of here. Inside of a div, we place other HTML elements. So HTML elements become nested, right? You'll often hear me talk about the HTML tree. That's because we're actually going to place HTML elements inside of other HTML elements. This becomes a lot clearer when we see how we're going to do this. So inside of a row, right, so we're going to think about this as a group. This itself is another group, right? Like the actual item itself is a group. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to nest another div. This is going to make more sense once you do a little bit of copy and paste here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another div, which is perfectly good to do. Make sure it's all lowercase. But this div, I'm going to give a class of item. We want to name divs something that makes sense to us when we're looking at the page. And just as I did before, I'm going to do the greater than sign to close the open tag, and I'm just type the ending tag or the closing tag so I don't forget it. How are we doing? We doing good so far? This making sense? Again, I know this is probably quite foreign, but I just want to show you what the process is like of actually building a site like this. So okay, we have this another group called item. Now what do we notice is inside of this item? Well, there's an image, some more text, and a button, right? There's basically, you can think of this as there's 4 HTML elements inside of this box. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create the image, right? We need to be able to make the image. And so I'm going to type open or less than sign. I'm going to start an HTML element, img. If img is short for image. And so this is how we're going to actually include an image in our HTML tree. Now, we have an image. We need to tell HTML what image we want to use, right? Like I think this makes sense. And so what I've actually done is from this mockup, I'm going to send this in Slack. I've created, you know what? I'm just going to send them like this. I've exported and found these 6 images, okay, that I just sent to the Slack here. These are the same ones from the mockup. So go ahead and download these. Just put them in your downloads folder from Slack. It's really easy. You just click download, right?
Yeah, it's the cloud icon with the arrow.
And it should, from Slack, ask you like where you want to save it. It should be a pretty nice interface. Does this any trouble here? We're getting the images we want to use on our site, and I just sent them in the Slack so they're easy to find. I'll wait 30 seconds so we can download the images.
Good pictures. They look much better than Epi's.
I was gonna say Epi's food is not this good.
Yeah.
Eppies would be flattered by these pictures.
Is that croissant AI generated?
I was gonna say.
I thought about going to Epi this morning and actually taking pictures of the things, and then I was like, like,
It would be so sad then.
it would be too sad. We couldn't put it on our beautiful website.
I think the muffin's AI generated at least. 'Cause the
I'm gonna be honest, I clicked on the first one that was a PNG and had no background.
Yeah, this is great.
Okay, were we able to download these? Can I get a thumbs up if we were able to download the images? Amazing.
Give me a thumbs down if you can't.
It's okay.
I will come check. So Emmett, goddamn.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Please, number 1 rule of Bootcamp is do not be afraid to raise your hand and do not be afraid to participate. There will be much more participation in future sessions, and by the end of this, we're all gonna be a family. So please do not be shy. Okay, once you have those downloaded, we're gonna go back over to the browser, and we need to upload these to our website project, right? So I'm gonna go into where it says node box here, and I'm gonna right click, and I'm gonna click upload. Right click upload. And then wherever you downloaded these, whether that's your downloads folder, whether that's a separate folder, go ahead and add all 6 images and just click open. So what you should see now is where we originally just had HTML, CSS, and package.json, we now have those 3 files plus the 6 images we just uploaded. Can I get a thumbs up if we're able to upload the images? Good? Perfect. Any troubleshooting? Can we?
Yeah.
What's the problem? Oh, I right clicked
Let's see.
on like underneath the files and then I clicked upload.
How far off?
okay.
At what point can I drag them into a
Oh, yeah. Alright, so.
Great clip.
Are you just dragging them into your folder? Reed?
I clicked upload from here.
Okay, so not directly into.
No, this is your.
You might actually, that's a good suggestion. If you can drag and drop, I imagine that might be possible. I don't know,
You're just
but
putting them into this folder named node box.
yeah, you just right click where it says node box. The file explorer will pop up, and then you can just click on the files you want to upload.
Yeah, okay, that's done. So just come to this voice or this.
Does that help?
Double
Were you able to figure?
I got one.
upload,
Okay.
and then
If you command click
images.
or like control click, I think when the files pop
Oh,
up.
okay.
I guess the.
We only do
Yeah,
this
so
one.
it's just that,
I think if
I
you could
clicked
do
all of them
all
and then
6 of
deleted
those,
the
that would be best.
So
Oh.
I'm trying to find where the
Oh, I
cat
didn't.
Ah.
Yeah, yeah.
Sort by
Yeah.
date added, and they should all
Okay, we good? Any other? Please do not be afraid to raise your hand.
Sweet.
This is the only like confusing, like in terms of like dealing with files that we have to do. Okay, we got all 6 images in. Thumbs up if we got all the 6 images loaded onto our site. Wonderful. Okay, back to that code, back to HTML. So we made this image. We started opening this image tag, but we realized we didn't know what image we're putting in, and that's why we went on this little tangent of uploading the images, right? So I'm going to go back to this line where I started creating this image tag, and I like to kind of indent, and this editor will nicely indent by default for us if we just hit enter. In HTML, you can have extra spaces, extra enter keys, like it doesn't matter, right? It's not like Python where you have to be like very tab specific. So we're gonna type img space, and just like we said class equaled row or class equaled item, we're gonna instead say src. Who wants to guess what src stands for?
We're not gonna keep moving until someone raises their hand.
Source, right? Where is the image coming from? Source equals, and then we're just gonna type the name, and it's gonna autocomplete for us the name of the image we just uploaded. So source equals coffee.png. Now, I'm gonna do something that looks a little confusing. I'm gonna type slash greater than sign. Some HTML tags, right? There's no content that really goes in it. Like the image itself is the content. It's not like like a H1 where we have text inside of it, right? So this is called HTML shorthand, where you're saying you don't need the closing tag separate from the opening tag. If you include the slash, this symbol just like this for images, that means it's like the opening and closing in itself. So you don't, this is like the opening part and the closing part all in one. I hope this makes sense why this wouldn't work for something like an H1 where we actually have text to go inside of it. Does that make sense? So this is like, because an image is just a source, we don't need an opening and a closing tag. It's just one tag itself. But inside of this item, we're also gonna give it, let's say H2. Actually, let's give it H4. We're gonna give it what it is, coffee. And then I think what did it have in the mock-up? How many calories it was? So 5 calories. I'm gonna do it. Okay, so we're gonna do H4, and then I'm gonna show you a new tag, P. Who wants to take a guess of what the P tag is short for? What was that? Parameter. Good guess, but no. Maybe let's see if this makes more sense. Who else has a guess? Paragraph, right? So H you can think of as short for header. So like that's a little bit bigger text. P is paragraph text. So the paragraph tag, this is where we'll include like small text in the paragraph tag. And then the last thing we had in each item is a button, right? This is like a button. And HTML shortens image to IMG, but it does not shorten button. It's just button. So we're gonna do this symbol to open a tag, type button. And then I'm gonna do the open tag, and then what goes inside of the tag is the text of the button. So it's gonna look like this, add. I'm gonna hit save. So here we have an item, and inside of the item, we have an image, the name of the image, the subtext that we had in this mockup, and a button that said add. We're just following what this image showed, like what our mockup looked like, right? And now, if we come back into our preview and hit refresh, we will see that this should load all of what we just did onto our screen. Does this make sense? Give me a thumbs up if you're able to get the image to show in the browser. Great. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is once we have this item, let's just copy this because all of the items are the same, right? Except for like we'll just change the text, but all the HTML itself is pretty similar. And so we're just going to I'm going to highlight all these lines and hit Command C. And I'm going to go make sure this is under, so you want to highlight the open tag and the close tag and everything in between. Copy it and then paste it. So this is beneath the closing div. These are their own individual groups. We're not putting it inside of the other item. It's its own item. And it's nice in this editor, if you like hover over the line number, you can like collapse the range it says. And so what this does is if I click on it, like now we don't see all the stuff that was inside of this item. We just see like the opening and closing tag. So it can be a little nice when we're working to kind of keep organized and understand how this HTML is structured. But basically, I just copied item into the same row. So instead of saying coffee here, I'm going to say latte. I'm going to change our image. I named these nicely, so they should have named nicely that they should just be the same name as on the left. Latte, and I don't know, I said 100, whatever. And then I'm going to paste it a third time, and here I'm going to say smoothie. Make sure I spell it right. Smoothie. I just say 200 calories. Okay, I'm gonna hit Command S. Make sure to save it. If it's not saved, if there's unsaved changes, you'll see, like if I change this to 120 calories, you'll see that there's that white circle at the top near the file name. That means it's unsaved. White circle, you need to hit Command S. But now, okay, so we just copy and paste it. I'm gonna collapse these to make more sense too. So now, can everybody kind of see here how like with this collapsing, we just see all we did is basically made 3 of these groups inside of our row. That's all we did. 3 of these groups inside of our row. And now, if I go back to the preview, now we will see that these are all showing up, right? We have 3 images with all this text. Okay, so we want these to be horizontal, right? By default, when we just add tags onto the page, they all go in a column. So we need a way to tell the browser, hey, actually put all of these items next to each other in this row. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our editor. Bear with me here for a second. In styles.css, if you click on the node box, whatever it's called, this will be the default styles in here. And this is called CSS. So everything we've done so far is HTML. We'll talk all about HTML here in the next week. As I said, that's the structure of the site. That's what's actually on the page. CSS is how that actually looks. And so what I want you to do in here is we're gonna type .row. So you know how we called that class? We said class equals row on that divider that had all the class equals items in it. What this is telling our browser when it loads is it says, everything that has a class of row, make it look a certain way. So I'm going to do .row, and then just like the example above with the h1 tag, but make sure to include this period because, as we'll talk about, this is actually selecting a class here. Just type display flex. Inside of these open bracket and closing brackets, display :flex semicolon. This is important that you always have a semicolon at the end of all of these lines in CSS. Now if we hit Command S and come back over and reload, this one line alone will put these all in a row together just like this with display flex. Okay, this is looking not too bad, right? We're making progress here. Watch how easy to get the rest of this is going to be. We can come back into index.html, right? So back to the structure of our site. And we have conveniently just created this row that everything for the part 2 looks exactly the same, right? Except we just had to change the actual items. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy everything we just wrote except for the H1, just like this. I'm going to hit Command-C, including the H6, the H3, and the row divider. And I'm just going to paste. And so this will probably expand. Like when you paste, it won't remain collapsed, right? Like you'll see all of the stuff that was inside that we just copied. But here is where we can actually now, I'm gonna just change this to step 2. I'm gonna change this to pick your pastry. And then if I scroll down, we just need to modify these items to be the pastry items that we want to show on our site now, right? So inside of these divs, all we did is copy and pasted the item HTML code. And instead of we have to change the image source. So here I'm going to change this to say muffin.png, muffin. Let's say it's 150 calories. Let's say here's a scone. Let's say that's 220 calories. And let's say the croissant. Make sure we change the image source. That can be 200 calories as well. Does this make sense? We just copy and pasted that divider we made and just are changing the image sources. So we're using a different image and then just changing the text inside of these HTML tags so where it's the right menu item that we're inventing. Now I'm going to hit Command-S again. And then I'm going to come back over here, reload, and would you look at that? Now we have all 6 of our menu items that we wanted to see displaying on the screen. Okay, I'm going to take a poll to see what we want to do next. There's 2 options we can go from this direction. I don't care which order we go. We could A, write the code to build out this like your order with the big button for place order. B, we could make this part look nicer first and then build the sidebar. So do we want to build the sidebar and then make everything look nice? Raise your hand. Or make this look nice and then build the sidebar. So build the sidebar, make it look nice, and then build the sidebar. I'm sorry, I think they got you beat. I think we're going to build the sidebar. Okay. Okay, let me go back to this mock-up here. So we need to make, this will be pretty easy. Look at this left-hand side was a lot more work than the right-hand side is going to be. So what we need to do, the only tricky part about this is like, you know how that display flex thing made the items left and right like that? Like, you know how when we wrote display flex on that row, it made all of the things in the row horizontal? We kind of need to do the same thing, except we need to put like the left part of the website on the left and this brand new section we're going to make on the right. Is everyone following me here? So like, we talked about groups of items on this page. We need to think of this whole left-hand side as a group, and then the whole right-hand side as a group. And so what this means is I'm going to go back to our editor, and everything that we've written, so literally we're going to go body. Just bear with me here for a second. This line right underneath the open tag for body. I'm going to create a divider, and I'm going to call this, give it a class of container. This will make more sense why I'm doing this in a second. So I'm not yet creating the closing tag. I'm just creating the open tag. And then right underneath that, I'm going to open another div with a class, and I'm going to call this, just because it makes sense to me, I'm going to call it left. So we just opened 2 dividers. But now we need to scroll down underneath everything we just wrote, and we need to make sure we close these dividers. So you always need to have an equal number of open tags and close tags in HTML, and it's important to track where you put these. So we're just thinking in bigger groups now. Hey, all of these are a group. And so I'm just going to close by typing 2/divs at the very bottom here. And like I said, this is a little easy sometimes to get a little tripped up on like where these are going. But if you actually click in between one of these tags,
How did you indent everything like that?
oh, Command S, it'll auto indent for you.
Right.
Yeah, good question. If you hover over like one of the closing tags, it'll show you like in this editor, it'll like you see how this div is highlighted, so it's kind of showing you like these are the open and closing tags together. So now what we need to do is we just wrote 2/divs. One of those was the first one was closing the left divider, right? Like they were saying, okay, everything's in that left divider. The second one we wrote was saying, okay, that's everything in the container. But we want to put left and right next to each other. So what we're going to do is in between these 2/divs at the bottom. So because we want to think about it, right, is like this container group has two groups itself. So you can almost think about like this, the big container has a left group and a right group. And then inside of that left group is everything we just wrote, right? Where there's like the row group, there's the item groups, there's this nested tree of HTML. But at the upper level, there's just a left and a right. And so here I'm going to type an open div class equal to right, and I'm going to close it right away so I make sure I keep track of the right number of opening and closing tags. Does this make sense conceptually? All of the HTML here we put that we want to go on the left of the screen, and all of the stuff we put in here we want to go on the right of the screen. Now, just because we called this class left and right doesn't mean anything to the browser. We're just doing this for our convenience. And so if I go back and look at this mockup, all we can see here is that in here, we just have, I'm going to call this, let's say, an H5 maybe, that says your cart. And I'm going to show you another popular HTML tag, which is called UL. So we're going to open and close a UL. And then inside of UL, we're going to write two LIs. So let's see, what did we say here? 1x scone and 1x latte. Who wants to guess what LI stands for? Anybody? List item. And who wants to guess what UL stands for? What was that? Yeah, unordered list. It's a little tricky. There's also an OL, fun fact, ordered list, but we're using a UL. And then the final piece of HTML we're going to write tonight is underneath this list, this unordered list, we just need this button. So open button, place order, close the button tag. I'm going to save it, always save, come back over to the preview, reload, and you'll say, Reed, I thought you said that it was going to be on the left and the right. We made those groups. You confused me. We made the divs, but it's still up and down. As I said, just because we named the classes left and right, that doesn't mean anything to the browser. We have to go back into that CSS file. I'm going to go back into the CSS file. And we want to tell the container, the dot container, right? The most outer group that we made, excuse me, that's what we want to put horizontally. So we're going to say dot container display flex. I'm going to hit Command S once again. I'm going to save. And now if we come back over here, we can see that now these are left and right of each other. Okay, we have 7 minutes to make this look prettier. You think we can do it? I think we can make some good progress here. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we need to make this a little wider, right? Because on our mockup, this itself was kind of more all the way over here. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to come back over to the editor, and I'm going to say this dot left container, the one we called the class of left, I want it to have a width of, let's just say, 80%. something like that, right? 80% width. The other thing, if you'll notice, this right container, we want to give it a background color. I'm cheating here. I'll tell you the hex code it's called. You're going to want to type background color, hashtag, and then we'll talk all about colors at a later time. But this is basically how you express color, how you tell the browser what background color we want to give this group. So we're going to give the right this background color. And we're actually going to give the left this background color. This will actually preview it nicely for us, what that color actually is in this window. So I'm going to hit save. I'm going to go back over our preview. Okay, we're getting somewhere. It's looking a little better, right? We got a little bit of color. Except now we got a little bit of a problem we have to clean up. This isn't going all the way to the end of the screen. So what we want to do is, let's say we gave this a width of 80%. Let's give this a width of 20%. And now what happens if we reload? So now 80% plus 20% is 100%. So now we can see that this is taking up the left and this is taking up the right. Okay, I want to add some styling to these actual items though, make these items look a little bit better, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our editor, and I'm going to say the actual item, so dot item. Again, we're using dot or period because we'll talk a lot more about this when we get more CSS, but this is the class we called the group, the class we called the divider. So dot item, we are going to say that it has a background color of white. So you can either provide a hex code, oftentimes you can also just provide the name of a color, so white. We're going to give it a nice border radius, let's say of 4 pixels. So what this is going to do is going to give it a little bit of a rounded look, as we'll see here in a second. And we're also going to want to add something called padding. So let's add padding of 15 pixels. I'm going to save, and let's come back here and see what this did. So now we can see these have some padding, right? Or we can see that they have a background color of white. And we can also see now that there's a little bit of space on the edges here of these items, right? So it's not it's not exactly up against the edge of that white box. There's a little bit of space. But I actually want to space these items out. We want a little bit of room in between each box, right? So let's go ahead, and I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to say margin right. I'm going to say 20 pixels, 20 px. I should have mentioned px stands for pixels. So we're saying, hey, make sure there's 4 pixels of a border radius, 15 pixels of padding, and 20 pixels margin right. Now these are all CSS properties we're going to talk a lot more in detail about. I'm just trying to show you some of the most common ones right now that come up a lot. And these will make so much more sense the more you use them. But for now, just trust me, this is how we're actually making things look a certain way on the page. And so now if I come back over to our preview once again, now we can see that there's a nice amount of space in between each of these items. Okay, we have 3 minutes. There's 2 final things that I want to do tonight. We're going to make these buttons look a little bit better, and then we're also going to make the font match what was in the mockup, right? I don't like this font. First thing we're going to do is change the font. So I'm going to actually go to Google Fonts. Don't do this because I'm just going to paste this for you. We're going to talk a lot more about Google Fonts, but I in this mockup use a font called Manrope. And so I'm going to click on Manrope. I'm going to get the font. I'm going to get the embed code. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy right here. Copy code. I'm going to paste this in Slack. You are going to copy these 3 lines of code. And we're going to go back into our HTML. And you know how every line of code we wrote was inside of this body? This is the only time we're going to put something tonight in this head tag. So head is stuff that doesn't actually show up on the page, but is important to our site itself. And so you're gonna copy these 3 lines that Google gave us directly into the index.html file. And then don't forget to save. And then once you've saved that, we're not quite done yet, because the last thing we need to do is we need to come back into the styles.css folder. And at the very top of the folder, you're going to use an asterisk and open it. So asterisk is short for everything. So everything what we want to do is we want to specify that the font family is Manrope. That's the same name of the font that we just connected to, right? So we're importing it through Google. We're saying, hey, Google, we want to use this font that you offer. And then in our CSS, we still need to specify, like, hey, that font that you just wanted to use, we actually are using it on everything on our page. So now if I hit save, and I come back over to this preview, now we see that this is the same font that we used in our mockup. Okay, I promised what we're gonna do. The last thing, we're gonna make these buttons look a little bit nicer. So let's come over here into the style.css, and we're gonna say, we're not gonna use a period here, we're just gonna say button, because button is the name of the tag. We're gonna say button. I'm gonna give it a padding of 10 pixels. I'm gonna cheat and come over to the mockup. Software we'll talk about how to use in a couple classes. I'm gonna say the background color is this color. It's a deeper purplish blue. I'm gonna say color, this means the text color itself is gonna be white. I don't want there to be any border. Sometimes by default there's a border on these buttons. It doesn't look that good. But I do want there to be a border radius of 4 pixels again. I want these to have a little bit of a rounded edge on the button. And now, to finish up, if I come back over here and reload, we can see that those buttons look much nicer than they did before. Okay, what do you think? For 45 minutes, I think this to this, not too bad for our first website, right? So, like I said, I don't want anybody to feel overwhelmed by this. I know we covered like 2 weeks of content, basically 2 or 3 weeks of content in 45 minutes. Tomorrow and next week, this is when I'm actually gonna go much more in depth about what the HTML tags are, why we did certain things. But I want this to be kind of looking ahead of what's to come. And I promise in a couple of weeks, everything we just did here today will kind of seem pretty obvious and kind of second nature moving forward. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you come back tomorrow. Tomorrow will be some setup and we'll talk a little bit more about this. But for now, have a good rest of your night.
Thank you guys for